Pure Dark Magician, the way we all want to play this deck. It's the way this deck can stay truest to its identity. However, since its introduction in 2017 with this strategy, the deck has become more and more outdated. Looking at the list in front of you, you'll find the basis of what the most competitive version of this deck in a pure light is. We start with the 2 Dark Magicians, the 1 Dark Magician Girl, along with the 3 Souls, 3 Rod, 2 Illusion of Chaoses, which typically have a preparation of rights with them, along with the Timaeus, along with the 3 Soul Servants, the 2 Circles. Typically this ranges from 2 to 3. Some people have even been cutting it down to 1. Just shows you how outdated this card is. This card used to be the best card in our list, along with the 1 Secrets, 1 Dark Magic Attack, 1 Magician's Salvations, and the 2 Eternal Souls. As for extra deck monsters, we typically go with the 2 Red Eyes Dragoons, the Dark Magicians, Master of Chaos, and Dark Magician of the Dragon Knight. Now, this is the basis of a pure Dark Magician list. And going into gameplay, you could see how much we could achieve with 2 cards. With Magician's Rod and Magician's Souls, summoning Rod, getting the Soul Servant, Souls dumping DM, summoning DM, Soul Servant stacking Timaeus, special summoning himself, and then fusing into Dragoon with 3 cards in hand. I think that's the most this deck can actually achieve just off 2 cards, right? With Magician's Rod and Magician's Souls. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is kind of demonstrate on how strong this engine, its ceiling is, right? When we eliminate all but whatever the engine is, the engine really pales in comparison to what current decks do. Obviously, in this video, you can see me having a lot of fun summoning, the Dark Magicians with Circle Eternal Soul setup, drawing the exact cards we need into making Dragoon, and things like that. Things are so fun when this deck is hyper consistent, right? We only have 20 cards in this example, right? So obviously, we're going to be drawing the cards we're gonna want to see to advance our game stay, and that's why these replays are so fun, right? Like when you see things like this, this deck isn't that bad. You have the Circle banish, you have Dragoons negate, you have a draw off the Dark Magicians, and even then, at its purest form, with the deck with all the fat cut out of the engine, and it's nothing but the engine at full gas, it's still only 2 interruptions, and I don't think that this engine by itself is just good anymore. If you want any further examples, I think this proves it. Yeah, okay, when the engine is pure and the deck's 20 cards, of course the engine's gonna look very good. However, I feel like since 2017, the game has evolved so much to a point where this just isn't good enough anymore. And what I'm going to show you in this video is just going over a few more engines and ideas that you can start experimenting with Dark Magician to, I think, help the community push the deck further. I think with some of these ideas and how brilliant some of the Dark Magician players are in the community, we can truly reach a ceiling with this deck that is kind of hyper competitive. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upset a lot of people. For the deck in its current state, I think this is what the Dark Magician engine wants to be. And if you don't agree with me, that's cool. Dark Magician purists can absolutely have their opinion and are entitled to their opinion on however they wish. However, I think this is what the Dark Magician engine wants to be right now. I remember, an engine doesn't mean it has to be a Dark Magician deck doesn't mean the deck has to consist of 30 Dark Magician cards. If you want to think like that, by all means, go for it. Unfortunately, my channel is not for you if that's the situation you find yourself in, right? These 15 cards are what I think is a majority of the Dark Magician engine. Yeah, sure, you don't get your Eternal Soul Revive. Sure, you don't get your Dark Magical Circle Banish. At the end of the day, what this deck means to do is it means to summon our best card, which is Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Dark Magicians, although it's a little bit overrated, and I know some people love it, some people don't like it, I don't think it's fantastic. However, I do think it has its place in this particular version of the deck in 2023. Master of Chaos is incredibly situational. I think it's a fantastic card when it comes up. It just doesn't come up nearly as enough. It is potentially OTK material, which I think is, it's needed in this game. If your opponent gives you a chance to essentially beat them in that one turn, Master of Chaos helps with that significantly, and I think it's needed for exactly that. The first engine we are going to be talking about is the one that my channel is most familiar with, or my viewers are most familiar with, and that is the Branded Fusion and Blazing Cartesia engine with the Dark Magician things. There's so many videos on my channel explaining on why this engine is so unbelievably good, right? And it's not that huge, right? A lot of people are saying, oh, you know, Matchy, this is a branded deck, you're not playing Dark Magician. I play 7 branded cards. If you count the 2 Fallen of Abaz, the 2 Cartesias, and the 3 Branded Fusions, those are the only branded cards. Obviously, deployment is included with the engine. I think I'd play it. Obviously, I wouldn't play it if I wasn't playing this engine, but deployment acts like a pseudo Souls in this situation. I think it's incredibly good. And Schism, although some people don't like it to be part of the engine, and even Pure Branded doesn't play it, I think in this particular version of Dark Magician, Schism having the ability to just floodgate your opponent with Winda is so strong. And, you know, for those of you who say, Matchy, this is a branded fusion deck, not a branded Dark Magician deck, Godspeed to you. Like I said, you know, my channel is not going to please everybody. And I'm just trying to make this the version I see the light I see Dark Magician in. I'm trying to see it in the most competitive and viable ways, right? So this is the first engine I'm going to be talking about. And so obviously we're going to be looking at the 2 Fallen of Abaz, the 2 Cartesias, 3 deployments, 3 branded fusions with the 1 Schism, along with the Apgalone, the 2 Windows, 1 Grang, Mirror Jade, Lubellion, 2 Albions, and the Dark Magician package. I don't include Sanctifier in this because I don't think Sanctifier is that necessary. It's just a cute little tech, as is Luluwilith, right? Now, the same way I'm going to be talking about this list, I've talked about it all over my channel. You know exactly what to expect when dealing with branded Dark Magician, kind of the niche interactions you can do. I just feel like the branded engine, it does what Dark Magician wants to do, and that's pretty much just set up Dragoon, get Dragoon in rotation, as well as generating constant advantage, right? From adding Branded Fusion from graveyard, from deck to hand in your end phase, to constantly adding Cartesia back, having that access and those lines of play is just really, really progressive. It's so good because it does a lot with 1 card. Branded Fusion in and in itself is like a 1 card Dragoon, giving you 4 other cards in hand to play with essentially. And I think that's just really, really strong. That's something that pure Dark Magician doesn't really offer. You kind of get the same kind of interruptions, same number of interruptions for significantly less, right? Now, you know, I'm not going to kind of go into test hands with this particular engine because there's so many videos on my channel just going over this engine, but I wanted to quickly just shout out this engine once again by saying I think Branded DM is the Branded Fusion and the Fallen of Abaz package with Cartesia is the strongest engine to use in Dark Magician. This video was going to be full of engines and I didn't want to dwell on this engine too long, simply because I've already went over it so many times, a billion times, just setting up Dragoons, setting up Windows with other tech cards like Village and things like that, right? This engine is just so unbelievably strong. And in the rest of the video, we're going to go over some other engines, but it wouldn't be a Matchy video without talking about and giving Branded Fusion its praise, right? So yeah, on to the next engine. Now, the next engine I want to go over is actually a very controversial one in Dark Magician specifically because of how much we rely on Magician's Rod's normal summon. However, I feel like the Adventure engine in particular, this kind of ratio with the 2 Water Enchantress, the 1 Griffin, the 3 Rights with the 1 Draco back and the 1 Fateful, I think that's all you kind of need for the Adventure engine. I think the engine is just really strong generically. Obviously, Magician's Rod is kind of a dead card in this situation because the engine doesn't allow us to activate normal summon monster effects. However, I've been tinkering with this engine a lot in Branded DM and in my Branded DM list, and I think it has a ridiculous ceiling. Maybe not even so much in the Branded engine, but there's going to be a card I'm going to talk about later on in the video. It's going to be the last card I talk about. And it's essentially the way this engine, if you're going with Dark Magician in a more synchro or a more link heavy strategy, obviously there's no tuners in Dark Magician, which is unbelievably disappointing. But if you're going into a very like heavy link strategy, I think this engine is ridiculous. Even a rank 7, some rank 7 plays with Wandering Griffin Rider is just really, really strong. But the reason why I was so gravitated towards this engine is how much synergy it actually has with Illusion of Chaos and Magician's Souls. Now, these two cards, kind of what they allow the engine to do is essentially they allow the engine to draw an unbelievable amount of cards and generate ridiculous advantage. Here we'll just look at the most basic test hand with Illusion of Chaos and Rite of Aramesir and 3 dead cards. Now we're gonna go into your standard, Griffin line and the Draco back line with the pop 1. However, what Magician's Souls and Illusion of Chaos, and actually the DM engine in general, allow for this engine to do and thrive with is how much drawing and regeneration with hand advantage and things like that it actually allows for, right? With this standard 2-card combo, it doesn't matter what's in our hand, we end with an Omni Negate and a bounce back. And in addition to this, say we open up with like a Branded Fusion. I think a Branded Fusion with this is particularly insane, right? Because Dark Magician's Grave, Branded Fusion sends the Fallen of Abaz, and immediately you'll still have 3 cards in hand with 2 Omni Negates and a bounce back. Or if you want, like that's obviously my Branded Fusion brain talking, or if you want, what you can do is you can link off the token and link off Magician's Souls into like an IP Masquerena and go into a plethora of link plays. Or the Griffin Rider and Dark Magician, like I said before, are both rank 7s. And what they allow for is essentially they allow for rank 7 plays, which just advances your game state tremendously. Obviously, we don't have access to Magician's Rod like we'd like to. However, I think that's a small price to pay for an engine that just generates so much advantage. And with the way the game is evolving, especially with the Dark Magician engine evolving going forward, I don't think Magician Rod is as important as it once was, right? We're not really pushing to grab our spells and traps as much anymore. So that's why I think that this engine can actually thrive in a deck like Dark Magician, regardless if you're going into a branded line of fusion, in a branded line of thinking, or like a very heavy link thinking, right? And either or, I think is just very, very strong. Now, one engine that I really, really want to stress on how actually amazing it is with Dark Magician is the Bystials. Being all dragons and predominantly dragons, it's just so easy to get into Dragoon. With Magna being able to search cards like Timaeus, along with like Seekers of Dark Magic, Dark Magician, and any one of these Bystials, it just generates so much advantage by themselves, right? Durastorm being able to, like summoning Durastorm, then Secrets of Dark Magic, fusing it away into Dragoon, with Durastorm being a pop by itself when it leaves the field, in addition to cards like Dragoon being an additional pop. It's just so many interruptions, right? Along with the Branded Regain and Branded Beast. So, and with something we need to keep in mind is what format we're entering. A lot of players, and expect this at your locals and upcoming tournaments and regionals, a lot of players are coming back on tier limits. I know how much a lot of people didn't like that deck because of its incredible run of dominance. However, it'd be foolish not to completely ignore it and not prep for it. Bystials are going to be a fantastic counter, and playing Bystial Dark Magician during peak tier format was one of my favorite formats to play Dark Magician in because of how ridiculously strong the Bystials are. The cool thing about this deck is how effective Branded Regain, Branded Beast, and Branded Fusion is with the Dark Magician engine. A really cool interaction with Branded Dark Magician is how much advantage these 2 cards generate by themselves, right? And I'll just quickly show you. With Magician's Souls, we just summon Dark Magician to the graveyard, summoning Magician's Souls from hand, right? This doesn't actually matter. Dark Magician can be on field or in grave. It really doesn't matter. Next, we'll activate Branded Fusion, which summons our Albion, sending Bystial Lubellion and Fallen of Abaz. Albion will now activate. Now here we kind of go neg, but it's not the end of the world. We'll just shuffle back our Magician Souls and our banish our Magician Souls and our Fallen of Abaz. With Lubellion, triggering, we'll just send a card back to the graveyard. It doesn't really matter what. These 3 cards are dead anyways, theoretically. And we'll just shuffle back these 2 and to our Dragoon. Now what will happen is essentially Bystial Lubellion will activate, summoning itself. Obviously you'd summon him in defense mode, but it doesn't really matter for this example. And then getting our Branded Regain. Here we proceed to end phase, and our Albion will activate, which will set our copy of Branded Beast. Now, what this end board essentially allows us to do is pretty much we have a pop and a Dragoon negate, but if these 2 cards were Bystials, or if they were live cards, this end board is just really, really strong, right? And with Bystials being an additional form of interruptions, it's really strong. However, one thing to keep in mind is the surgence of triple tactics thrust. Remember, Bystials play into thrusts terribly, and thrust is a very hard counter to Bystial lines of play. So that's one thing to keep in mind. However, I think this engine is really, really fun and really strong. And I think it can see a comeback in Dark Magician. I know I've had a lot of success with Bystial Dark Magician. And with the addition of like Cartesia and things like that, having access to Dispatter, which is an additional really, really crazy card, or a card like Chaos Angel, are just additional lines that really can push this deck forward in other ways. So like I said, this is an engine that can see further experimentation, especially going into a format where, you know, Tyr is making a significant comeback, and that deck is terrifying. An engine that's been around for actually ever now has been the Nadir Servant package. Now, a lot of people don't really know this, but Nadir Servant actually works very well with Dark Magician, because essentially, especially under Red Ice Fusion, which is an engine that we'll talk about right after this. But Nadir Servant in Dark Magician is actually very strong, because essentially Nadir Servant's typically going to be the last card you play, and Nadir Servant just sets up a lot, right? It'll get you Dogmatica Punishment if you send Titaniclad, along with getting you Ecclesia or Fleur de Lis. Or you can add the Shadal Schism, which gets you the Apcolone Engrave and then the Windows on your opponent's turn. But another cool interaction with Nadir Servant, especially in branded Dark Magician, is that Nadir Servant essentially allows you to recover the Fallen of Albaz, which is engraved. And sometimes in grind games where that Fallen of Albaz isn't necessarily accessible, Nadir Servant is actually an incredibly crazy card in the grind game. Even just adding like a Fleur de Lis or Ecclesia after you're done your combo, and Fleur de Lis being an additional form of interruption, is actually really, really strong, right? Cards like Titaniclad, grabbing you your copy of Dogmatica Punishment for an additional interruption is just so strong, and the Nadir Servant actually gives off a tremendous amount of value. One line of play that kind of moves away from Dark Magician is the Quem and Luluwela side of things. I think these two cards can potentially have a place in DM. More so Lulu, because Lulu you get off like Grand Guignol and things like that. But Quem, Grand Guignol, and if you're playing the Cartesia stuff. Quem, however, is also incredibly strong, but Quem is more so directed into a more branded heavy strategy. And although I love this card in pure branded, it's an absolute machine. I feel like this more so than anything I've specified, like a lot of people don't like that I play branded fusion in DM. If you start adding Quem and Quem lines of play, then it truly diverts to a very branded heavy strategy. And if that's something that you're okay with, Quem is a fantastic option along with like branded openings and Lubers. I personally think that's overkill. I don't think you really need them, but they're a fantastic, fantastic option, right? Nadir Servant and like branded fusion with souls is an unbelievable combo. Or like, you know, your Dark Magician line of stuff with a branded fusion and Nadir Servant in hand is just ridiculous, right? And I think one thing you have to keep in mind when talking about cards and additional sub engines like this is, do these engines essentially do more or less than Eternal Soul and Dark Magical Circle? Nadir Servant in this case is less cards than Dark Magical Circle and Eternal Soul, if you don't include obviously the Cartesias, the Ecclesias and the Fleur de Lis. However, the Nadir Servants, they do more than Dark Magical Circle. Do they take away from the identity of Dark Magician? I don't really think so, because I think the identity of Dark Magician is in this monster right here, in Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and how well we can maximize his power with not only follow-up, but advantage and essentially game state, how much we can advance our game state with Red Eyes Dark Dragoon on the board. So Nadir Servant is a fantastic engine, in my opinion. I think it has a very, very strong place in this format. Maybe not so much the format, but in Dark Magician, if you know that's something you want to experiment with. Now, the reason I talk about game state, and that's the Runick engine. I think there's my first ever video on my channel was about the Runick engine. And I think more than any other engine, the Runick side of things, although despised by a lot of portion of the community because of how dominant it's been in Master Duel with like Runick Sprite and things like that, This Runick variant allows you to play Dark Magician closer to its purest form with Dark Magical Circle and Eternal Soul, because of the inherent protection from its extra deck monsters. Cards like Hugin being able to protect the Eternal Soul from like destruction, doing the same thing that Dark Magician and the Dragon Knight does, is actually really, really strong. Dark Magician and the Dragon Knight also allowing you to protect Fountain is incredibly good. And what these Runick cards essentially allow you to do is you're allowed to pitch them off Magician Souls to constantly generate advantage, as well as doing what Dark Magician lacks, and that's constantly protecting or doing the 1-for-1 interaction, which is Dark Magician as a deck incredibly if it like falls and fumbles to decks that force it to trade 1-for-1. And that's why Dark Magician is incredibly weak in a lot of different formats going forward. However, in addition to those 1-for-1 interactions, the one thing that the Runick engine does is it draws a lot of cards. And having cards like Soul Servant that just say, hey, I want to see this specific card at this specific time is so strong. Pair the Runick engine with more 1-for-1 interactions like Imperms, or grab your cards like Triple Tactics Talents, or, you know, blowout cards like Super Poly, even Branded Fusion. I played Branded Fusion with Runick DM. Because the extra deck monsters are forced to be summoned in the extra deck monster slot, having Branded Fusion and having the ability to just clear them away, right, by fusing Albion or Fallen of Abaz with them to make a Mirror Jade is just really, really strong. And in this, like, I'll just quickly jump over to a quick, you know, gameplay, a random test hand that I'm going to play live for you right now. Just immediately having the ability to just draw a bunch of cards, as well as setting up, you know, simple like 1-for-1 interactions. Here, for example, what we'll do is we'll just do the standard Dark Magician stuff, right? We have Fountain and Flashing Fire in hand, or Destruction. I'm not exactly sure which one that is. But what we'll do is essentially we'll just go through the Dark Magician line of play, you know, with Souls, grabbing pitching Salvation, chaining Soul Servant, grabbing Rod, and then Rod summoning Dark Magical Circle, which essentially just, you get to see the top 3 cards of your deck. And then with Soul Servant engraved, we just banish it, and that's that. We banish itself, and then whatever we see off Circle, whether it's another Runick card or a Dark Magician piece, it just pluses infinitely. Here we stack our Runick card, which is really strong. And now, without doing anything, what we have is we have our Eternal Soul with Dark Magical Circle banish. In addition, we have two interruptions with the Runick cards, as well as drawing cards. Now here, if you want to get greedy, we'll just see what we draw. Obviously, I don't expect to draw much here. In this situation, I'd probably just keep the 2 Runick cards in hand and, you know, try to interact with my opponent that way and have 3 interruptions with the Runick Fountain draws. Here, we'll just gamble and we'll see what we draw. We don't draw into anything, but it is what it is. But this is the strength of the Runick engine, right? It just allows you to have those 1-for-1 interactions, which is really, really strong, as well as constantly replenishing your resources, which is something Dark Magician lacks. The final card I want to talk about is the card that's currently coming out in Age of Overlord, and that is SP Little Knight. This card is going to single-handedly break this game. This is going to be the best generic rank 2. It's going to, you know, set up IP Masquerade's ceiling was already ridiculous. It's going to be even better. What this card is going to do is essentially provide so many trades, from like 2-to-1 trades or even 3-to-1 trades just off one card, and just having the ability to summon it very consistently with Dark Magician, with like Magician's Rod and Magician's Souls, which are our most generic 2-card combo, or in other, you know, means of engines that we just played, that I just showed and explained. Like, for example, Nadir Servant. Obviously, if Nadir Servant is activated, we can't summon Little Knight. But let's say we have a Fleur de Lis or a Ecclesia. Those can go into an SP Little Knight. Runick, how it constantly summons a lot of extra deck monsters, and we just free up those extra deck slots with SP Little Knight. Summoning itself is just unbelievable. Or Bystials just being able to summon themselves and making SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight is going to be such a good card going forward that it's going to be essentially an engine on its own. And I think this card's going to be unbelievably expensive, I think, when it comes out in Age of Overlord. However, I think it's going to be in every version of Dark Magician that's not branded DM. I think SP Little Knight is going to be a staple, not only in Dark Magician, but in every deck going forward. That's how strong this card is actually going to be. Anyways, that's all I have for the video today. I just want to thank everyone for watching. I know I've been on a little bit of a hiatus. It's simply because, life gets really busy, but I'll continue trying to make incredible content for everyone watching. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait for the next one, and I'll see you then. Have an amazing day. Thank you for watching.